Today we're going to start our read aloud of Black Star, Bright Dawn. This book is a historical fiction written by Scott Odell. This story is dedicated to the brave legion of musher women and men who have run the Iditarod, the grueling dog sled race across two vast mountain ranges and the Yukon River, against 50-mile-an-hour blizzards in temperatures of 60 degrees below, for more than 1,000 miles, from Anchorage to the Gulf of Alaska to Nome, on the ice-bound Bering Sea, and to the magnificent dogs who pulled their sleds. Chapter 1. On the 10th day of November, the sun did not rise. This was the day of the sea froze up, and there were no more waves. All the birds, except for the ravens, flew south, and we would not see them again until spring. It was very cold. The air was so still you could hear people talking far away at the end of the village. My father did not go out on the ice that day. It was thick enough to hold a man's weight, but he waited 2 days, then 3, hoping that lead streaks of open water would appear. This is the best time to hunt in a kayak, the little canoe made of deerskin. After the 3rd day and the streaks of open water had not appeared, a blizzard blew from the north and lasted for almost a week. It brought floating ice down from the Bering Sea, and the polar ice pounded against the ice along the shore. Bartok, my father, decided not to wait for the leads to open. He told me to get the dog sled and the harnesses and to harness the dogs. He would hunt without the kayak. We'll hunt Bering seals on the ice, he said. Bearded seals are heavy. They can weigh 600 pounds. I harnessed our 7 dogs to the sled and chose Black Star to lead the team. Bartok did not lead him. When Black Star was a year old, my father decided that he would never in this world make a good leader. He's stubborn, my father said. You tell him something and he does something else. He's smart, I said, remembering the winter when we were coming home and just on the other side of the Salmon Creek. Black Star pulled up and wouldn't move. My father took the whip to him, and still he wouldn't move. Then my father walked out on the frozen creek and fell through, the ice up to his neck. I remember this time, but said nothing about it. Black Star knows a lot, I said. Of the wrong things, Bartok said. He's got too much wolf in him. His father came from Baffin Bay and had a lot of wolf blood. Then bred him to be with a Siberian husky, so he's mostly wolf. I liked Black Star. I had liked him since he was a month old. There were 7 in the litter, and he was the most playful of them all. He bounced around and took nothing from his brothers and sisters, giving 2 bites for every one he got. He was the purest white, with a black star on his forehead and black slashes under his big eyes. But of everything, it was his eyes themselves that captured me. They were ice blue, the color of the ice that floats down from the Bering Sea on the day when the sun is at its tallest. At first I thought he could, and suspicious and wild they were, looking at me from a world I had never seen and would never know. After a while I felt that behind this look was a shadow of friendship that changed, and I saw nothing but friendliness. Then that changed too. Sometimes when moon shadows were on the trail and we were hauling things down from the forest, the wild look would come back again. Before I harnessed him to the sled, Black Star went down the gangline, his bushy tail curled over his back, his ears pricked forward. I had seen a motion picture one time at school about a parade in Washington. There were soldiers standing in the line and the captain walking along, stopping to look at each one of them. Black Star reminded me of the captain, who, when he stopped, he reached out and gave the dog a sharp bite on the ear. I tried hard to break him of that, my father said. He wants the team to know that he is the leader. Yes, but they know he's the leader without having their ears bitten off. Maybe you can do something with that. I'll try, but I liked Black Star the way he was. You couldn't harness him up first. That way he wouldn't have a chance to go along biting ears. You tried that once, remember? And it didn't work at all. I don't remember. My father couldn't forget something he didn't wish to remember. Now he didn't want to remember that he had used a whip on Black Star. He was a strong-willed man, but the dog was stronger-willed. He was silent as Black Star went down the line, biting ears, all the while watching the caribou whip. There isn't a cloud in the sky. What a fine day to hunt, I said. Last winter, my father had killed only 3 bearded seals, and there was a whole month when we didn't have much to eat. Hunting would be better this year, my father said. He was good at telling how far south the seals would go on their summer travels, 1,000 or 2,000 miles, and when they would return to the cold waters of the Wamengo. The full moon was rising. There were scratching clouds far down in the west, but it would be fine. It would be a fine day. Bartok got out of his hunting things, put them on the sled, and got in beside them. We hunted the South Shores last year. Bad luck, he said. Maybe we should hunt north this year. What do you think? North? I said, eager to go in any direction. My mother took her time to answer. She was wearing a parka she had made for the summer of fox fur and wolverine. She looked very pretty. South was a bad idea last year, she said, handing Bartok some smoked salmon strips to eat while he was out on the ice. So it should not be bad this year again. No, I am sure, Bartok. Last night I had a strange dream. I was gathering clams along the shore. Out of the sea came a bearded seal. He was very thin and could barely move on his flippers. Will you give me some of your clams? I was about to say that I needed them for my family, and then I saw that each of his ears was a gleaming pearl. At once I knew that it was the king of the bearded seals. You can have all the clams. There are more than 2 dozen. If you make me a promise, I said. I am starving. I'll promise anything, Bartok Machina. He knew me. He called my true name. Then promise that you'll have some of your subjects, many of them, visit our shores this winter. 100, 200. With that, he scooped up the clams, swallowed them in one gulp, and waddled fast into the sea. Every year this sort of talk went on between him and his mother, Mary Kay. When he went out on the ice, they would always talk this way and always about a dream that he'd had. There was a reason for such talk. Hunting is dangerous. Danger lurks everywhere. Killer whales are 30 feet long, and if a man is hunting in a kayak, they can snatch him up, kayak and all. If it's angry, a Kodiak bear can kill a hunter with a single swipe of his paw. Polar bears are the worst of all. They fed on seals, and because hunters always smell the seals, The bears think that they are seals and track them down. A hunter does not go out on the ice without fear, but he is not a man unless he does go. Women never hunt. My father was even criticized for letting me drive his sled to the ice to help him bring back the seals that he took. Women's place was at home. I had been doing it now for 2 winters. It started when my brother was killed on the ice, the day he speared a bearded seal with the harpoon rope looped around his neck, and was dragged into the depths and drowned. In my father's eye, somehow I became his son, who had died on the ice. The hunters in the village and their wives did not like me to go out with their father. It made no difference to him. For a long time now, I had driven the sled to the ice and helped him load the heavy seals on the sled and driven back home. Often, we drove down the village streets in broad daylight so everyone could see us. Chapter 2. Smoke from the breakfast fires hung above the village. Men were staring off towards the south. My father and I went north. We went along the shore, hunting for a good place to go out to the sea. During the freeze-up, polar ice was driven down through the Bering Strait by the north winds and struck the shores. The collision flung up great mounds and spires and ridges, mixed with sand and rock. These ewoks formed an icy wilderness between the shore and the frozen sea. It took us nearly an hour to find a place to hunt. We staked out the dogs and climbed a jagged ridge. My father saw the head of the bearded seal, just the top of it, sticking up through the ice. The seal sank out the sight when it saw us. My father climbed down from the ridge and gathered up his things, his knife and his harpoon with the long rope fastened to it. He followed the ridge until it came close to the stretch of the flat ice and the bearing hole where the seals had shown its head. Between my father and the hole was a narrow bridge of ice. He got down on his hands and knees and crawled slowly from one side to another. Seals have good ears. They can hear footsteps many yards away through the ice. I watched him crawl to the lip of the breathing hole and not move for a while. He coiled the long rope harpoon. Then he crouched beside the hole, a step away, his legs braced, his body bent forward, and the harpoon in his hand. My father was the best hunter in the village. It was because he was very patient. He could crouch for hours this way, bent over, waiting for seals to show its head. Often he waited for half a day, sometimes for a whole day, and when I brought him food, he wouldn't eat it for fear that he would not be ready for the harpoon. There was so much waiting that I always brought school books to read. In this way, I was able to keep up with my studies. My teacher, Helen Taranen, was good about letting me make up time that I lost, but today it was cold. The pages wanted to stick together. I did manage to read about the golden seal, which does not inhabit our waters. Her fur jacket is made of hair so fine that the 300,000 are packed into 1 square inch so that she's always warm and waterproof. Imagine who counted all these hairs, I wondered. Books can be so excitingly useful too. My mother named me out of the book that she was reading the morning of the night that I was born. It was about seals and beautiful creatures who lived in the 2 worlds. She came to a place in the book where the deepest of the sunless winter, for some strange reason, a day dawned bright as the day in spring. That is how I got my name, Bright Dawn. I closed my book, climbed down from the ridge, and fed the dogs who were restless. Then I climbed back up and kept an eye on my father. He had not moved. He looked like an ice statue crouching there among the equinox. The moon was full. By late morning, its light began to fade. A south wind came up and shifted around the north. It was much colder now. I climbed down and built a fire and warmed myself. Then I climbed back up to the ridge. Bartok still hadn't changed his position beside the breathing hole. The seal had another hole somewhere. I decided seals can't stay down for much more than 5 minutes before they have to come up for air. The wind died and it started to snow. Large flakes at first, then small ones that had ice on the edges. We were miles from home. Part of the distance was through the equinox. I called to my father to give up the hunt. He did not answer, but he looked like a snowman. I called again. Slowly, he raised his hand to quiet me. The snow was coming down harder, but it was very still, except that far off I heard the rumbling of shelf ice. I climbed down from the ridge, taking my time. It was very slippery. The dogs were lumps in the snow. I scraped them off. Searching around for driftwood, I tried to build up the fire. I had no watch, but I was good at telling the time of day. It must be an hour after noon, I decided. The fire would not burn, and from a cloudy sky, the moon cast only weak shadows. But I found my way along the path Bartok had taken. It was hard to see. I got down on my hands and knees and crawled on the edge of the shelf and groped along to the bridge that connected the shelf to the polar ice. It was not there. Instead, I saw a jagged point sticking up like a spear. Beyond, I caught a glimpse of blue water, the sea. I cupped my hands and shouted. The wind flung the shouts back in my face. Was my father on a foe that was drifting away from the shore? Had he come back to the bridge, found it gone, and taken another way to reach the shore? Wherever he was, I would never find him. I went back to the camp, harnessed the dogs, and started off again. The raging winds, the equinox, all looked alike. I did not try to find the way back to shore, knowing that I would never find it. I walked along beside Black Star and let him guide us. When we were near home, Mary Kay heard us and was at the door. She was calm. Mother and wives were always calm when bad news came. They were trained to hear bad news. Not a winter went by that at least one of our men was not lost on the ice. Mary Kay hurried into her parka. My feet were wet, beginning to freeze, so I changed my socks and boots, and we ran up the road, spreading the news through the village. All of the women and old men came out and followed us to the outpost store. Anvo Norvik, the man who owned the store, said nothing can be done until the hunters come in from the ice. We knew that. He looked at his watch. 6 o'clock, he announced. Some will be back in an hour. Everyone will be back in 2 hours. In 2 hours, we will start the search. Now we will return to what we were doing. When we came in, Norvik was opening a box with a pry bar. The bar was still in his hand. He gave the box a jab as we filed out. Everyone wanted to take us into their homes, but my mother refused. We walked into the blizzard, heading along and against it, through the village to our home. But we felt better having been with our friends. Chapter 3. The first thing I did when we got home was to tie a leather rope across the room under the ceiling. If a rope goes limp, my father had told me, it's a sign that the hunter is in danger. If it goes limp more than a little, if it hangs down, then the hunter is dead. Then the clothes that hang behind the stove to warm him when he comes in are taken down and put away forever. An hour went by. The rope did not move. The blizzard piled snow against the window. It shut out the light, so I lit a candle. My mother busied herself over the stove. She did not believe in the rope. She had gone to a school in Nome where they did not like what they called Eskimo superstitions. When we heard the dogs barking in the village, I ran outside and started towards the store. The blizzard was at my back and I went fast. Most of the men were home from the ice, more than 20 of them. They had heard the news from Anvo Norvik, but they wanted to know it from me. I told them what had happened, leaving out nothing that I thought would help. They hugged the hot stove and were silent. I wondered if they would ever thaw out and talk. At last, squat, lank-haired Utak Tukatu, who was a good hunter, said, "Now we go to look for Bartok." "To find him," Louis Kachtag said. "And bring Bartok home," someone said. "He is safe. He is friends with the ice for a long time." I asked Tuktu if I could go with him. He didn't bother to answer. Hunting on the ice was not something for girls or women. This I knew well, but I asked him again as the men filed out. Again, he didn't bother to answer. They took 4 dog sleds and 9 kayaks. I followed them down the road and saw them disappear in the driving snow. When I got home, my mother was watching the deerskin rope, even though she said that she didn't believe in it. "It hasn't moved a bit," she said. "It still hangs tight." We cooked supper and ate some of it. The blizzard had stopped. I cleared the snow off the windows so that we could keep track of the weather. The moon shone in the cloudless sky. Around midnight, we heard dogs barking in the village. I went up the road to see what it was. The last of the hunters were returning from the ice with the seals that they have killed. We divided the time. My mother slept for an hour, then I slept. Towards morning, while I was watching the deerskin rope, I saw it move, or thought I did. I got my mother and she sat down and watched too. "I see nothing," she said, a little angry with me for believing. "You are tired. Your eyes are tired." "They are not tired," I said, begging her pardon. We watched together for a while. Then I got up and made breakfast, a big one, pan bread and all. 10 long hours and more had passed since the men had gone out. My father could be coming home now. An hour past noon, a sled came up from the south. I ran out, thinking it might be a sled bringing my father home, but it went on to the village. When I got there, they were carrying Louis Katchatang into the store. He had fallen into the open water and was covered with thick ice, even his face. After he was thawed out, Katchatag told us that my father had been sighted. He was on a large ice floe moving slowly north past the village. The hunters thought they could reach him in a few hours if the wind didn't move the ice floe away from the shore. I went home and told my mother that what I had heard. It was good news, but she said nothing. Getting up to look out the window, coming back to keep an eye on the deerskin rope. Neighbors brought food, special food, like caribou steak, that they knew Bartok liked. The wind came up and slapped hard against the house, against one wall, then another. We couldn't tell what direction it was blowing from. It blew cold air down the chimney and filled the room with so much smoke that he could see the stretched rope. I got out a pair of my father's best mealskins and the ones that were made from sealskin, bleached in winter weather, soft and almost white. I had made the tops They had patterns of different colored fur and bands of wolf fish skin. They looked fancy. Boots are as good as ropes for telling how things are. I hung them up by the window where I could see them clearly in the moonlight. As long as the boots move, even a little, if they walk, the hunter is alive. If they stop walking, the hunter will never, ever wear them again in his life. Hunters drove by on sleds and went to the shore to thaw out and eat. I cooked food for them. All the women cooked food. The men were hungry. Jack Eagle ate 3 thick caribou steaks and a loaf of bread before he went back to the ice. The news was good. Whenever the snow let up, they had caught glimpses of my father. He was still on the big foe, and it was moving along the shore, not out to sea. That day, if they could steer a kayak through the fields of floating ice, they had lost 5 kayaks already. They would reach the foe and bring my father home.